Welcome to Cognitopia Multidisciplinary Academic Fest, organized by Government College for Women, Tirunelveli. I am Dia Manoj, and it's my privilege to host this interview today. We are honored to have with us Professor Sabu Padmadas sir. Thank you for joining us today. As a renowned demographer and a global health expert with 28 years of international experience, we look forward to hearing your valuable insights. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. Can we move to the question section? Professor Sabu Padmadas, sir, can you tell us about your academic journey and what inspires you to pursue a career in demography and global health?
So ever since I was a child, I was always inspired by data. So a career that I would have aspired to do was actually more to intelligence, true intelligence. So intelligence means research. So I always somehow I never had any exposure regarding research, but yet there was something in me. And that, I think, it took a while. And when I was when I was doing my mathematics degree, I realized that, well, you could do more with those numbers. And then I was in search of statistics, and then I thought, well, demography is a very specialized field, and it deals with data. So I just picked it up, and the rest is history.
How has your experience as a demographer and global health expert informed your research and teaching?
So, as I talk, when you talk about data, it's all fascinating, right? So I think the beauty of data I've discovered, I thought, well, it should not confine within me. It should be shared with students. So my aspiration was always using data and using research to inform teaching. So meaning that when you bring in research into teaching, it transforms, because then students are inspired. So I always get complacent when the students find their own kind of career path through that. So I think I use lots of demography and health, global health. So demography was a kind of foundation subject, but then I got specialized in epidemiology, biostatistics, and then towards global health. So it was a journey, and when I narrate those journeys, then there is already an inspiration in the classroom. When there is an inspiration in the classroom, I get inspired to do more research. So everything, fundamental is doing research. That's very important.
You have worked on numerous high-profile research projects, including the United Nations Reproductive Health and Family Planning Country Program in China. Can you share some insights from that experience?
So it's a long story, but I will do my best to cut it in very short. So ever since China became the permanent member of the UN Security Council, this was back in the 70s and 80s, that time, 70s, I think, to be precise. Then there was actually, towards the 80s, I think they had a kind of pressure from the whole world and the United Nations to relax what is known as the human rights. I think to put it correctly in right terms, I think it's reproductive rights, because of the one-child policy that they have introduced. So the one-child policy was introduced back in 1979. At that time, they didn't have the data, but yet they introduced that policy. So they introduced the policy and then they started looking for evidence. But it was too late. And by that time, China was already transforming very rapidly. Most of the people would have one child in urban areas and so on. They had special economic zones, I think, which created massive movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. So when they all moved to urban areas, the workers, they didn't have much option but to have only one child. So, and this was actually going to the extremes because, when you prefer to have only one child, most of them, they opted for a boy. That's wrong. I mean, they should have really opted for a girl. Now they regret that because girls are in demand in China. So what happened is that there is a generation of population, with dominant, predominantly represented by males in the population. So that means so we did a population projection. We came to know that in by 2020, which has already passed, there will be about 30 million bachelors, young boys without brides. And that was really serious. Then there's actually the aging aspect, all those kind of things. So in recognition, I think the United Nations started to, because it's very difficult to transform the whole country. The one-child policy was a regress policy, because those who did not follow the policy, women were forced to have sterilization, women were forced to have abortions, women were forced to have selective abortions as well, and then also female infanticide was also very high. So I think it was really quite a terrible history when you look at it. India also had a kind of similar journey at that point. So the United Nations in 1994, they introduced a new kind of a recommendation or a plan of action to relax these policies of reproductive rights and to provide more informed choices to women and couple and so on. So China was signatory to that big conference that was held in Cairo in 1994. So in 1998 they started the program. 2002 I was invited by the United Nations to kind of conduct an independent evaluation. So I just did it for 10 days. I submitted my report and I said that that there are lots of things that didn't go well in that program. So by that time, they already invested something like $16 million. So it was really a lot of money. So when I got back to the University of Southampton, then I received an invitation from the Ministry of Health, asking me whether I could come and help build this one. So again, I'm cutting the story. So we presented 3 times the evidence stating that China's population policy, the one-child policy, should be relaxed or should be removed altogether, because otherwise they will have a massive aging population. There's already an aging population, so there will be an imbalance between, in the population age structure. There is already a decline in working age population, meaning that that's for the. And we also said that probably China will soon have what is known as population implosion. Implosion means, the numbers start falling. So, and that happened as well. So everything happened. So in all the meetings, I think when we were present, there were many leaders present at that meeting back in 2008, 2009. So I was a little disappointed that the government didn't do anything. I mean, although they were working behind, but when Mr. Xi Jinping came as the president, he made all changes. We recommended 2 things. One is to relax the one-child policy, take their hands off one-child policy. Second is to integrate 2 systems, a health system and a family planning system together to optimize the resources. Both happened, actually. So the first time I heard about that was when I was flying from Dubai to London. On the flight, I saw in the news that I was a little disappointed. I said that I worked for 13 years with the United Nations and with the ministries to transform that policy, but they didn't have the courtesy to tell me. And what happened was that that was actually my misunderstanding. None of my team members, or the deputy minister, didn't know that this was happening. Only 3 people knew, including the President Xi Jinping. But when they changed the policy, that was a big moment for all of us, because we were able to influence a big historical policy. That's a kind of little story.
Okay, thank you. What do you consider the most pressing global health challenges facing us today, and how can we address them?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question. I was very impressed by that question, because global health, although people think that health is determined by only certain factors, behavioral factors, it's actually determined by macro conditions. So I would say there are lots of challenges, but the primary challenge at the population level is actually climate change that we have seen. Climate change is really is going to the extremes. I think today I'm going to talk about it as well, about how the planet's climatic conditions and the whole kind of geophysical structure has changed, which means that we will have more of these droughts and extreme weather conditions. Climate change and weather conditions are different. But what will happen is that when the weather patterns change, it affects the agricultural production. So from there onwards, it has a very, clear cycle of influence of different things. And so that's actually one of the pertinent one. Second, I think I would say is geopolitical things like the war and the conflict and so on. And you'll be surprised, in the 21st century, we have seen more wars and more conflicts than the previous century. In the 21st century, we have seen more diseases coming through than ever before. So there is a radical, shift or geopolitical shift that's happening, as well as, uncertainties, economic uncertainties. All these will affect health and well-being. Health is not just, physical health; it's also mental health, social well-being. So I think, we are at a very important crossroads, and we need to be paying full attention to all these environmental conditions. That also is important, like, inbuilt environment in front of the college. So, for instance, how many people can actually walk from here to their homes? Very few people can walk. So these have an impact on human health, like in terms of metabolic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and so on. So there are lots of challenges.
Can you discuss your work on China-Africa population development, South Cooperation initiatives, and its implications for global health?
Right, sure. So China, as you know, that they have been, almost they are the second largest economy in the world. So, I think it used to be predominantly, you have, there's always what is known as a colonization of ideas, ideologies, and even health. So, for instance, if we thought that, when penicillin was discovered, it's coming from the West. So, West and East. So, there's always a inferiority kind of status. It may not be visible, but it is that actually, the colonial times and so on. So, I think that the West to East cooperation, meaning that more giving aids, for instance, that there are wars, conflicts. So, they give aid to the United Nations through various bodies. So I think that has been the case. And well, of course, it also has a very, a sense of collaboration and sense of commitment to the rest of the world. Because I think if they don't resolve the problem in the East, they will have their problems. So that's the main thing. But now China, having, secured their economic position, it started to really, kind of engage with Africa. So it was predominantly South-South cooperation was actually led by the government of China with the support of United Nations and United Nations Population Fund. And I was actually part of it because I've been, so I can actually, I have more friends in China than in other parts of the planet. So I think it is more to really, provide aid actually to address global challenges, critical challenges like education, health, and environmental conditions, infrastructure. So China is investing heavily in Africa, although there are some criticisms with regard to that. But then I think, it's a good start. So now India. So there is an India-South-South cooperation that's already happening. India is doing remarkably well, I think, in terms of engagement with other countries. And so our foreign relations, external relations have become really good. India is now known to the whole world much better than ever before. Also because of the technology, the media, and the Prime Minister, of course, the Prime Minister Modi is actually championing the kind of global role. So there are, lots of these influences happen.
How do you think interdisciplinary research can help tackle sustainability challenges, particularly in low middle income and transition economies?
Again, very good question. One of the, my reflection on this would be, if you look at one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, one is actually to reduce inequality, right? Reducing inequality in health, or reducing inequalities in education, reducing inequalities in per capita income, all require efforts not just from one sector. It's actually multiple sectors. Even when you take, for example, any health condition. So the best example was actually COVID, right? During COVID, it was not just the health department. The transport department was actually equally involved. The environment department was, then the housing department, everything. So we have to come together. So in research, particularly, an interdisciplinary approach is very, very important. The best example is also climate change. Climate change, you can actually do, hydrologists or, kind of geologists, experts would actually work on climate change. But then, to understand it more from an anthropogenic perspective, you would need multiple disciplines. You need sociology, you need economics, you need psychology, you need the basic science, you need engineering, you need medicine to understand this holistically. Same that applies to almost everything. So I would say that not everything is interdisciplinary, but I think pretty much what we have seen today, there is an interdisciplinary element. So that's why, in the college, let's say, for instance, I think somebody's studying MA in economics or BA in economics, they should also try to understand, about climate change, and they should also try to kind of gain knowledge about the world, global challenges. They are part of it.
As the founding executive director of the University India Center for Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Development, what are your goals for the center, and how do you see it contributing to global development?
Mm-hmm. Right. So that I think India's role in the world has changed completely. We are not just the world's most populous nation, but we are also the most influential nation today. And I think for us at the University of Southampton, I think there have been research going back to 1960s, engagement with India like Mysore, Pune study, and so on, cohort studies. It's initially focused on fetal origin of adult diseases and so on. So, I joined the university back in 2002. So this is my 23rd year at the university, long time. So I think during that journey, I was able to introduce India better to the UK, and it was a strategic initiative of the university which I led. I developed a strategy and I established an India Center for Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Development. The main idea was actually to create a platform for researchers from the university to engage with other colleagues in India. So we work with the Indian High Commission, with the British High Commission, with Niti Aayog, with the ministries, government ministries in the state, in the central, as well as the state ministries. And our kind of main goal is actually to strengthen capacity on both sides. When I say both sides, it's not just India is full of talent. India is a land of wisdom. So that wisdom can also be shared. So that's the purpose. The other important thing was actually I was inspired by Mr. Shashi Tharoor. When I met him, at that time he gave a very pertinent speech at the University of Oxford, and that became really viral. And he told me that, well, unfortunately, in the current circumstances, that the British students have very little idea of India. They don't. Because the Indian history or Indian any aspect of India was never included in the British syllabus and so on. So how can we change that? So then I thought, well, there is and that inspired me actually. So I went and I kind of had some discussions with the colleagues, and then I came up with a course called Emerging and Resilient India under the India Center thing. So I have students from geography, from physics, mathematics. They're all coming and taking that. That's an elective course. So it's actually promotion, not just promotion of India, but also giving them the opportunities. So we have about, I would say about 98% of the students are British students taking the India course. And they get inspired because what the India that they see is usually, what they see in BBC and CNN and so on. Now they have a different perspective. So they expressed an interest to come to India. And so I took a group of students to India, to Bombay for the first time. They have never traveled beyond United Kingdom. So it was altogether a fantastic experience. And then through that center, we are the first university in the world to establish a comprehensive campus, a university branch campus in Delhi. So we are the first one to land in India, with this initiative. So the work has already started. Probably in the next couple of months, I think there will be a campus that will be fully installed in Delhi. We call it University of Southampton, Delhi.
You have received awards for your international engagement and academic excellence. Can you share your thoughts on the importance of international collaboration in academics?
Right. I think that's a very good question again. I mean, I'm less interested in the awards, but actually one thing that I believe in is actually collaboration is very key. Sometimes people, even people, institutions, countries, states think that, well, they can do everything. That's absolute, nonsense. You have to collaborate. You have to, so the simple, to put it simple, in a simple words is that, well, if you want to walk a mile, you walk alone. If you want to walk forever, in a long distance, you walk together. So you have to, the collaboration is fundamental in research, because what happens is that when you have a research problem, then you have different angles, right? So that's where the interdisciplinarity comes. So climate change from an anthropology perspective would be completely different from an engineering perspective. So in fact, an anthropologist or a sociologist would really explain climate change a lot better than engineers. So those are the kind of things. So I think over time, I did my best actually to, and then to commit to this promoting interdisciplinary research, and that paid huge dividends, and the returns of investments were significant. I was able to really, train a lot of PhD students and from various countries, from over I think 20 countries in the world, from Africa, US, and so on, as well as I think because it's our responsibility, right? Everyone has that moral responsibility to kind of help the next generation, support the next generation, the current generation. And I am personally fascinated all the time by teaching. So I spend most of my time with students, and I don't lecture in my classroom. I don't do lectures anymore. I've stopped lecturing. I stopped teaching. I only talk. I talk with my students.
How do you balance your research, teaching, and leadership responsibilities? And what advice would you give to early career academics?
Yeah, so that's a very hard question in the UK context, particularly. So, well, in the UK, how your kind of an academic life is distributed is you have 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% administration. But sometimes, you take some responsible roles. So I was the dean responsible for international affairs. So that time I had to really do a lot of work. But yet, I didn't want to miss my teaching or research. So it's actually hugely taxing in the sense that you have to find time and to do your research and teaching and admin work. But what I would say is that, well, I think there has to be a work-life balance. That's very important, because otherwise you'll get burnt out very, very quickly. So what you have to do is actually you have to follow what is what you are really good at. So for instance, the if you are passionate about research, do research. But my perspective or my advice or suggestion would be that everyone, whether you're a student or whether you're a teacher, whether you're a principal or vice chancellor, whoever it is, they should do research. And that research should be transformed in the form of education. So education should be informed by research. An education which is not informed by research can actually be, it's static. It's not dynamic. You don't really change with the world. You have recognized for your innovative teaching and mentorship. Mm-hmm. Can you discuss your approach to teaching and how you inspire your students? Yeah. So, whether it is teaching or research, research is what? You're researching. But there has to, in that process of researching, you are also trying, you're trying to find ways to solve problems. So that is, when you try to solve problems, you're also thinking out of the box. So I'm always the out-of-box person. I think in that regard, I wanted to try to do things which people believe that, it cannot be done. So when people say that it cannot be done, my mind always says it can be done. That inspired me and that helped me. So I designed a course on global health at the university level. Back in 2010, I brought in the people from medicine, from health sciences, from geography, from environmental sciences, sociology, economics, you name it. From all disciplines I put together and developed a course. And that course is now, it's running still, fully packed. So when I think there was a time that we had about 400 students at one point taking that course. So they were all inspired. Many students changed their career from sociology or economics or from biology to global health. So that was actually that's the kind of thing that we need to do. So I think for that, I think which I had, system was very happy. My university was very happy to see that, and lots of students. I've trained probably over 1,500 students altogether, and some of them are working with the United Nations at the moment, and some are working with one happened to be the advisor to the Prime Minister of the UK, and so on. So I think that's what inspires me. Well, I think so. They have found their own ways. So I think I would say that that again, I don't want to say that I was just successful for what I've done. I was successful because I was able to mobilize a team to work together, and that the same thing I practice also in research.
How do you think universities can better support the next generation of researchers and global leaders?
The universities have very important critical role. It's a moral responsibility. They have a very key responsibility to ensure that they help students with a curriculum that helps them to kind of be future ready and job ready, right? Because jobs are, I think, it's not just finding the jobs, but also giving that confidence. A university education is all about transforming an individual to be a better citizen, right? It's all about giving that student, that individual student, their confidence. So today you're sitting in front of me. Tomorrow you might be, the media minister, or you might be with the CNN broadcaster. Who knows? That's the kind of that kind of confidence, that kind of knowledge. It's not just knowledge, but it's a full human development happens at the university. So universities are now being challenged because the jobs are changing. The World Economic Forum has already said that about 90 million jobs will be lost within the next 2 to 3 years. 90 million jobs. At the same time, there's another 100 million jobs are created. So, ChatGPT, people think that ChatGPT, artificial intelligence is going to completely take away our lives. That's nonsense. I mean, that is going to create more opportunities. But then the question is, are the universities ready, prepared to confront that challenge? Meaning that there should be a course on ChatGPT in women's college. Help students saying that, look, so you better understand what is ChatGPT, how best you can use ChatGPT for your studies, rather than kind of misusing it. Yeah. So it has to be responsible AI and so on. So there are huge opportunities. Universities can play a significant role. If they don't play that role, then probably the universities will cease to exist.
What advice would you give to students interested in pursuing a career in demography, global health, and sustainability?
Right. Well, all three. It's a three-dimensional kind of opportunity. So demographers can actually, they're like it's just like water. You just pour water on any surface, it becomes that surface. So there's no identity. Demographers can work with engineers. They can work with clinicians or medical experts, like what I do most of the time. They can work with sociologists. They can work, but they have a prominent role because again, a society is shaped by information, by data, by that data. So population data, for instance, For example, we all know about census, right? Census. The use of census is wide ranging. So from the data perspective, there is an opportunity, but also integration of other disciplines is possible through these routes. So I would say that if you are passionate about data, then don't think you don't need to think twice, because people nowadays they use there are courses like data analytics and data sciences. They're literally the same. It's all the old wine in a new bottle.
What drives your passion for transformative interdisciplinary research, and how do you stay motivated?
Right. Every other time, whenever I talk about or whenever I do research on any aspect, I always think from a multidisciplinary perspective. So there is a difference between multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary is that actually you're actually finding ways within your fields and then borrowing. Multidisciplinary approach means like you need actually several disciplines to address a particular topic. So it varies, but regardless of that, I think most of the things that we see today, we experience today, there is a very clear interdisciplinary lens to that problem. So finally it all depends on how an individual or a researcher or a scientist looks at certain things. So if a scientist is narrow-minded, then they look at their own discipline, then they say that, look, I have discovered what is known as light. But today, light doesn't come just from electricity. There's also solar. There are different forms of energy that can actually produce light. So that is the whole idea, that you have to be conscious of the relevance of different disciplines. You can't be the jack of all trades, but I think the point is that an awareness is very important. Yeah. So somebody who is doing music must have a course or an understanding of AI. So I think it's extremely important.
Okay, sir. Can you share any personal or professional challenges you have faced and how you overcome them?
Right. Right. Okay. Well, I think the best way to put it is that, well, human beings are the most complex, right? Yeah. You can actually, for instance, you can be a shepherd to 1,000 sheep, but you can't really, manage one human being fully, because it's very difficult to understand human being. So I have confronted, challenges with teams, challenges with institutions. So institutions are also full of people. So there are bottlenecks and so on. But I think they are just part of it. As long as you focus your work, then you have certain basic etiquettes, basic characteristics. Like one example is emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is all about understanding others in that microcosm to perform certain activities. So again, what I would say is that it's all about the human interactions. So human interactions can be sometimes complex. Sometimes people who are doing excellent work, absolutely phenomenal work, are disrupted by colleagues around or by certain laws, rigidities, and so on. So overcoming that is actually very important, and I have overcome those. I've managed to overcome those challenges, and it's not easy, but there is a methodology that you can follow to overcome those challenges.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.